Hi, welcome back. I hope everyone had a great Christmas and New Year and that you're ready to get back to looking at some of the important women in the Bible. As I was going through my information this week about Mary, I realized there was really too much to do in an 8-minute video. So I've divided it into two groups. This week, we're going to talk about what the church, basically the Roman Catholic Church, has said about Mary. And next week, we'll look at the biblical references to Mary. So there was very little discussion of Mary in our earliest Christian documents. Paul mentions her only once, and then only to prove Jesus's humanity. By the year 150 AD, a document was circulated called the Revelation of James, or the Gospel of James. This apocryphal document, or document that's outside of our current biblical canon, gave Mary a story and a life before the birth of Jesus. Although generally thought to be fiction by the theologians of its day, it made its way into popular thought, and much of what people think they know about Mary even today comes from this document. According to James, Mary's mother, Anna, knew from the time that she was born that God had Mary destined for great things. Indeed, she was such a holy child that her care and education was given over to a group of priests. When she hit puberty, it was no longer appropriate for her to live with the priests, so a deal was made with a local carpenter named Joseph, who was an older widower. Joseph was to take Mary into his home and act as her protector, but he was not to have sexual relations with her, as she was to remain ritually pure. By the late 2nd century, Bishop Irenaeus of Lyons wrote that Jesus was the new Adam and Mary was the new Eve. In other words, Mary was the mother of the new humanity through whom God makes a new beginning. Eve obeyed Satan, but Mary obeyed God. And so the two poles of womanhood were set, the sexual temptress and bad woman Eve, and the virginal and good woman Mary. By the 3rd century, the idea of Mary's perpetual virginity had become accepted. At the time that the Gospel of Luke was written, in or around 85 AD, it was generally accepted that Jesus' birth was the result of a virgin birth, but no mention was made of Mary remaining a virgin after his birth. The fact that the Gospel mentions his brothers and sisters would actually speak against this idea. In the 2nd century, the church was busy fighting various heresies that stated that Jesus was not actually human, but a divine being in human guise. To combat that idea, the church stressed the normalcy of Jesus' birth. By the 3rd century, there was a growing group of consecrated virgins, or female monks, who pledged to remain celibate. Since these women were considered at that time to be more perfect Christians than other women, Mary became the most perfect of them all, and therefore it was decided that Mary kept her virginity during Jesus' miraculous birth and for the remainder of her life. The brothers and sisters of Jesus mentioned in the Bible became Joseph's older children from his first marriage. In the 5th century, the Nestorians claimed that Jesus had two distinct and separate natures, one divine and one human. Therefore, Mary was the mother of the human Jesus, but not the divine Christ. To combat this heresy and to maintain the Creed of Nicaea, which stated that Jesus was both fully human and fully divine, the Council of Ephesus in 431 AD officially named Mary Theotokos, or Mother of God. Mariology, or the study of Mary, reached new heights during the Middle Ages. In the 8th century, two important theological concepts involving Mary became generally accepted and eventually made their way into church law. The first was the Immaculate Conception. Now, this is not the same thing as the virgin birth of Jesus, but states that Mary was conceived without the taint of original sin that haunts the rest of humanity. Mary remains sinless and virginal her entire life. The Assumption of Mary, that Jesus comes and takes Mary to heaven and saves her from the corruption of the tomb. As such, she became the resurrected church, ascended into heaven and reigning with Jesus, or the Queen of Heaven. In heaven, Mary had a maternal influence over God and became our mediatrix with God. Mary is able to turn God away from his anger and vengeance and plead mercy on our behalf. In Bernard of Clairvaux, in praise of the very Virgin Mary, Mary has an intimate role in the redemption of humanity. She's the aqueduct that leads the waters of grace down to earth. Although Christ is still the one true mediator, according to the book of Hebrews, Christ the King had at some point become unapproachable. So Mary mediates with Christ, who is the mediator with God on our behalf. Mary takes on various titles over the year: the Star of the Sea, guiding ships to safe port, Mother of Mercy, Queen of Heaven, and Mother of the Church. The Hail Mary prayer became an important part of piety of the common people and is still important to many people today. In the 17th century, the Council of Trent reaffirms Mary's role in defense against reformers who dropped the veneration of Mary. Vatican II stated that Mary is a model for the Church in the matters of faith, charity, and perfect union with Christ, but toned down her role in redemption. Current thought on the Immaculate Conception states that Mary's union with God in grace is so profound that she alone remains faithful to God's will her entire life. She models the role of redemption for all of us, in that redemption is divine grace plus human cooperation. Rosemary Radford Ruther, a Catholic theologian, believes that the veneration of Mary meets humanity's need for a feminine side of God. All the ancient religions had gods in female and male pairs. Early Hebrew thought allowed for a feminine side of God, and mothering images of God appear in Job, Psalms, and Isaiah. But as time went on, the feminine side of God was dropped and God became only male. Christianity picked this up, and all three persons of the Trinity were named male. Dr. Ruther theorizes that as both male and females were made in the image of God, God must have both male and female traits. Humanity recognizes this at some deep level and seeks the feminine side of God, which Christianity has removed. Mary, over the years, has filled the need for the comfort and understanding of a mothering God. To ease you back into the classes this week, I'm going to ask you an easy question. Has Mary been an important part of your faith? And if so, how? Just let us know on the Facebook page in the group. And next week, we'll pick up again with Mary and actually look at what the Bible tells us about her. Thank you, and God's blessings this week. Amen.